We are back. We glazed over quite a bit in the last couple videos, especially about the NOP, or the NOPs. So I kind of want to go back and talk about some of that stuff in a little more detail. Talk about some of that stuff in a little more detail. The first thing I want to go over is we were talking a lot about instructions. So if we open up the game, eventually. Oh, there must have been an update. Yep. Doesn't matter. I clicked that twice, but. So if we attach this to the game, attach Cheat Engine to the game as the case may be, well, I guess we are going to have to wait because I'm going to need some value to find, or I want to find the value that we were using in the previous videos just to maintain some sense of continuity. So new game. New character, random, karma, yep, spend 1, 31. There we go. Keep them in sync. Alright, so what we were doing before is we were going to finding these addresses or values, synonymous in this context, right clicking on them and then going to find out what writes this address, attach debugger. Then we would use or trigger some event in the game that would write to that value or that address. And if we subtract points, this is basically what we did. We ended up doing them for both, but for the purposes of what I want to talk about, we don't have to do that. So a little bit in the previous videos, we had or I had said things like, well, the instruction is at this address. So let's just sort of go over that in a little more detail. Just like variables or values that are stored in memory, assembly instructions, or in a more general context, the code that actually makes up the game is stored in memory as well. And each individual instruction has an address in memory, just like each individual value or variable has an address in memory. And that's why we can do all sorts of crazy things like knopping them, which is what we were doing. And to make this a little more clear, or less clear, but I think more clear, we'll go over here and go to Show Assembler. Now, never mind, all the crazy stuff down here and all this stuff. Cheat Engine will automatically sort of index to the address that you had selected, and you can see that the code here, ESI plus E0 or EAX, is the same as what we have here. The addresses are the same. So what you can do is this gives you, or not even what you can do, but you can see that this gives you a general idea about how every individual instruction is stored at some address in memory, and that you can find these instructions and manipulate them by using their memory address, which is exactly what Cheat Engine does when you NOP something, and we'll show that right now. So what we had done before is we had selected one of these. This is the one that fires or triggers when we click the plus button here. You can see the count just went up to 2. So if we right click on it and we go to replace with code that does nothing, Cheat Engine gives us a label. We're not going to mess with that. As soon as we click OK, you're going to see this instruction essentially just disappear, and it's going to be replaced with about 5 or 6 NOPs. So let's just do that. And there you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can see that in memory, what Cheat Engine has done is it has obliterated this instruction that existed, and it's basically knocked out this instruction with as many NOPs as is needed. Now, why do we need more than one NOP? Essentially, it's because this is just in a general way, but the basic premise or the basic reason why is because a NOP is I want to say it's a 1 byte instruction. 1, 2, 4, yeah, basically that this instruction here has some length that's associated with it. You can kind of get an idea by looking at the array of bytes over here, and we'll get into byte arrays and things like that later on. But you can kind of see that, let me see, it's 3, and then 4, and then 5, and 6. Let's see if we can maybe make this a little more clear. So if we start up a new notepad here, let's check Cam Studio. we got some time. So let's type out, or you don't even have to. Do we have to? If we go to copy selection to clipboard. All right, so if we right click on this is what we just knocked out. If we right click on that and go to copy selection to clipboard, we'll come over to our untitled here. We'll paste it in. We don't care about the memory address for the purposes of what we're trying to illustrate. We don't care about the instruction. So let's just break this out like that. So is there a correlation that we can notice between how many NOPs and how we just broke that out? There absolutely is. You can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 NOPs. If you go over here, we broke that out into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections. And so whenever you are knopping something out, or you're doing any kind of code injection, frankly, this is not specific to NOPs, and we'll see this as we get into more advanced code injection, like writing scripts and things like that. Whenever you're overwriting or injecting code at a certain memory location to sort of clobber an existing instruction, such as what we just did here, you have to make sure that the code that you're replacing it with has the same amount of bytes as the instruction that originally existed there. So you can that the array of bytes that made up this instruction, move ESI plus E0 EAX, essentially that is 6 bytes. And then so in order to actually NOP it out, you have to actually use 6 bytes. If you didn't, then the game would crash, because it would has the games and applications in the operating system in general has some assumption or some implicit understanding of how many bytes is required per instruction. And if you start doing code injection and things like that, and you inject code and you don't pad it, is sort of a technical term, with the right amount of bytes, then all kinds of internal state will get confused and the application will crash. I'm not sure if we can really illustrate that. I mean, we can't just say delete this. We could, when we get into just writing scripts and things, we'll intentionally prove this point by crashing it. But if we go off on a tangent and try and, as I would say, make that more concrete, we would just end up confusing ourselves even more. So let's basically just run through this one more time real quick. Doesn't matter which NOP you click on, but let's restore the original code. Okay, so what was the original instruction, or the original location of the instruction? 13C1FF31. Is that FF31? Right here. All right, so let's right click on this, replace with code that does nothing. Yep, give it a label. You can see it does 6 NOPs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, the reason it does that is because this instruction requires 6 bytes. So in order to replace it and not cause all kinds of internal confusion for the application and the operating system, then you have to basically put in 6 bytes. And the way that this works when you start doing code injection is, does that mean that the code that we inject is limited to 6 bytes? No. What it means is that you basically allocate, this is maybe getting a little more advanced, but we're rapidly moving towards this. But basically what you do is you allocate some chunk of memory way off in some arbitrary location, and then you jump to that code. And we'll start talking about jumps here in a little bit. But basically what you're doing is you're telling the application, stop following this linear execution path and jump over to my code and start following that execution path. And then whenever you're done doing whatever you want to do in your assembly script, you'll basically jump back and execution of the application will resume right here. Or right here, that second click, not the NOP up here, but the click right here. And then the application will be none the wiser, and it won't crash because you've padded it and all the bytes still line up and everything like that. So that's kind of the basic idea of how code injection functions on a basic level. And that, again, it talks more about, what are we actually doing when we do NOPs and things like that. So instructions have addresses. We can use that to our advantage, as we've shown here. Let's restore the original code. No, that's not what we want to do. For some reason, we lost it. Let's see if we bring it back up. Yeah, I don't know. We probably Not the code, replace the code, not the code, replace the code. We probably confused Cheat Engine here to some extent. You can see that there's no more option to restore the original code, so you can go to replace with code that does nothing, which is the closest thing. And Cheat Engine is basically saying this is a really bad idea. That this is not what you think it is, and you should not do this, or you'll probably end up crashing your program. I'm not sure how we lost it. Let's check all 6 real quick. Maybe there's some subtlety. Well, it doesn't matter because we're going to end up closing the application. But that does sort of prove the point a little bit that when you're knopping things, and not even when you're knopping things, but when you're getting involved with injecting code at specific locations, it's easy if I kind of know what I'm doing, I would like to say, but it's easy to confuse the application, Cheat Engine in this case, and basically get into a point to where you can't restore the original code. And we were kind of zipping through it there, where I was like, oh, I don't care what they label the code or anything like that, and I wasn't really thinking about it, just trying to prove the point. But when you're doing this on your own time, definitely think before you click. Would probably be a good piece of advice. So let's close that, close that, close that. No, we can close this. All right, so that's the basic thing right there. Instructions, which is just basically a generic term for code, is what most people call it. Have a memory address, just like a value or a variable, and we use that to our advantage. What's the next thing we're going to talk about? In general detail, the context of instructions. We'll talk a little bit about functions and things like that. We'll show off a feature of Cheat Engine where it can basically sort of strip out all assembly instructions that belong to a specific function that you're looking at. So that's something that we're going to jump into in the next video.